All right, you guys, sorry. Had some reception issues there and had trouble logging in. So, okay. Let's see. Okay, cool. So we'll wait a little bit and then we'll rock and roll from there. So you guys, my tradition, always having a cup of coffee, or organic, of course, or usually like sencha green tea, but I've been enjoying getting back into jasmine green tea as well. So boom, remember, always in class too, try to stay away from plastics, especially with heated liquids. It's just an easy way to decrease your exposure to various estrogenic chemicals. So I was going to have a guest on today, but we rescheduled, so I'll be doing a solo cast. And you guys, I'll be talking about how to fix low testosterone, low total testosterone, okay? Which is like a very huge problem for a large portion of the population. And you can kind of find a myriad of articles and a myriad of studies showing there's like a decline of testosterone from decade to decade as a population as a whole in American males. And just know that it's very easy, if you're just very healthy, to have a total testosterone of like 700 to 800 nanograms per deciliter. Even in your 50s and 60s, okay? I've had many clients get to these numbers no problem. And it just requires, like, honestly though, mastering basic health principles, which pretty much almost nobody's doing these days, which is why 9 out of 10 Americans right now are metabolically sick, and 8.5 out of 10 are either overweight or obese, and then a myriad of other random health issues going on. Maish, let me know if I pronounced your name correctly. That one's a little tough. Just names are a little tough for me to pronounce. Let me know if I pronounced that name correctly. Maish. Sometimes names are a little tough, and then on top of that, the text here is so small on these screens. So you guys, we'll be talking about how to boost your testosterone naturally without the use of drugs and having to poke needles into your butt twice a week and stuff like that, okay? And if you guys have any questions on any of these topics, of course, just let me know. And if I know the answer, I'll be happy to answer it, and then we'll go from there. So you guys, just like I always do a lot of my lives, I'm just going to go off top things or important things to consider that are not in any rank order of importance. And what is important will vary from one person to another depending on which stage of the journey they're on. And you guys, just like I always say, remember, when taking health advice or any advice, whether it be finance or life advice or anything from people online, be very careful. Just use it as a very general reference on some things to look into. Jerry, what's going on? But be very careful with following people online, including me, because like we have a few people on this live right now. How would I thoroughly be able to give them advice, especially something as complicated as like physical and mental health advice, if I never met the person personally and I never got a chance to thoroughly assess them? And a thorough assessment takes around, like, at least for me and my clients, around 3 to 4 hours to do. Usually there's like a 3-hour upfront assessment, and then there's usually a follow-up 1-hour assessment, maybe like 4 or 5 months into the program, depending on the person's needs, et cetera, okay? These thorough assessments are critically important, and that's 3 to 4 hours for like a relatively healthy individual. So if a person has like a myriad of health issues, it could take much longer, and it usually always takes a lot of like follow-up, usually weekly phone calls or stuff of this sort, to make sure the person is actually being compliant with the procedures and stuff of that sort and answering any of their questions. And what I feel is also critically important in a health journey is to have a person there with you, because oftentimes people don't have anyone there with them, and that's an important part of the healing process. Just knowing with confidence that you have someone there along with you to help answer any questions when they arise and to help encourage you. And more importantly, you have to understand, when a person is suffering with chronic health issues, like chronically low testosterone, for example, inevitably they have a virus in their belief system, intentionally or unintentionally, most always unintentionally, but the end result is they have a virus in their belief system, like a mind virus, that's basically leading to a set of behavior patterns over usually long periods of time that lead to poor health outcomes, such as poor metabolic health being, like, for example, high blood pressure, or high resting blood glucose, or low HDL, or high triglycerides, etc., etc. Chris, what is going on? We're talking about testosterone today and how to increase it without using drugs. And stuff of this sort. So inevitably they have a mind virus in their belief system that's leading to various behavior patterns that are leading to poor lifestyle and nutritional choices, which inevitably lead to excess weight, high blood pressure, high triglycerides, low HDL, high resting blood glucose levels, low testosterone, high estrogen, high total estrogen, whatever. I mean, the symptoms could vary a gargantuous amount, okay? But the end result is the person's biology ends up breaking down. So just like, like a virus, like COVID, for example, it infects the person's respiratory system and ends up killing them. But a mind virus also, infects a person's biology by making that person feel it's acceptable to do certain behaviors that are leading to the deterioration of multiple systems in their human body, or one of the systems in their human body. And remember, there are 12 systems overall, but it's also critically important to remember that all of these 12 systems basically work as one system to keep you alive. Like, how are you going to stay alive without your endocrine system, without your hormones? How are you going to stay alive without your central nervous system, like the brain and the spinal column and all its nerve roots? How are you going to stay alive without the skeletal frame, or the muscular system, or the lymphatic system, or the reproductive system, etc., etc. So all these systems they all need to be working. And the second one stops working efficiently, it kind of acts as an anchor, and it pulls all of the other systems down. And eventually the end result is the person ends up dying. So thus the mind virus led to the death of the biology of that specific organism, okay? And that's why it's critically important to have a new belief system in this person's life, preferably that's a health conscious or health centered belief system, to help saturate whatever mind virus they have going on in their head. And this is so important, and people overlook this a gargantuous amount, and that's why nobody's getting better. Again, 9 out of 10 Americans are metabolically sick. 8.5 out of 10 are overweight or obese. And, half of Americans develop cancer in their lifetime, half die from it. Close to 900,000 Americans die from heart disease or cardiovascular disease related disorders, etc., etc. So these numbers are huge. And no one's even batting an eye because, again, the normalization of mental and physical pathology in American culture has gotten so many standard deviations towards the extreme of pathology. It's like literally almost comical. And you guys, I would recommend, even if you're not in the health field, just go to a medical convention, or go to a nutritionist convention, or registered dietitian convention, or go to a chiropractic convention. And trust me, these conventions look like obesity conventions. Or go to a psychology convention. Those are the worst, man. These people are like so sick, and that just shows you how collapsed the health field is in America. Not even health professionals know how to live sustainably or healthy themselves, which is crazy. And don't take my word for it. Please do not take my word for it. What do I know? I've only been doing this for like 20 years professionally, right? I'm telling you guys, you don't have to be a practitioner to go to these. Just go to them. They'll have cool gadgets that are completely worthless, of course, but you can kind of check them out, and they're cool to see for the most part. But again, just look around, scan around, and see, like, dude, this isn't a medical convention. This is obesity and a mental sickness convention, or this isn't a chiropractic convention. This is like everyone has lower back and orthopedic issues in obesity convention. And again, you guys, let's use common sense, please. Just, even if you have an IQ of 2, you can see it's like, dude, if this person doesn't even know how to do it for themselves, how are they going to teach you how to do it for you? Yeah, it's not going to happen, man. Oh man, but the industry keeps spinning, and the U.S. is throwing God knows how many trillions of dollars at this point into healthcare, and yet 2025 Americans are mentally and physically the sickest humans in all of human history. all of human history. I say it often, but I gotta say it again because it's a disaster, you guys. And it's only a disaster because the healthcare practitioners are living unsustainably for sure, but you are, paying the money and not questioning their practices. Like you go to a typical doctor, they chat with you for like 5 minutes, and then here's some drugs meeting a problem, usually at a biological level, where in fact it's usually at, I think, in an emotional dimension. And, if you're still alive, come back in 3 months and we'll see how you're doing, et cetera, et cetera. No absolutes. There's some rare situations, like if you have like a severe bacterial infection of the stomach, like a really bad case of H. pylori, may need a week or two of antibiotics. But the questionable practices are like when people have, again, this mind virus that's leading to poor behaviors that are leading to the deterioration of the person's biology, and they go to a doctor's office and they're given like a gargantuous amount of medical drugs. And you guys notice, let's use common sense again. Take a look at people that are on a lot of medical drugs, and you will see they look and feel terrible. And you would think like the more medical drugs they're on, the better they would look and feel. But they look and feel terrible. I've never seen a person on like 5, 10 medical drugs that looked sane, like mentally sane, more over aesthetically appealing, okay? Okay, so testosterone, you guys, it's on the decline, it's going downhill. Most even 20-year-olds at like 5 or 600 nanograms per deciliter. They should be at like 800 to 1,000, no problem. And here's some things I would look at personally. And me, like living by example. You guys, I do it by example. I show you guys it's possible. I do it consistently. I do it with a bunch of my clients. Even one of my clients is on this call right now. Okay? And I'm like almost 41 already and still at almost 1,000 nanograms per deciliter. Okay? Where the average 20-year-old these days is around like 500, maybe 400 nanograms per deciliter. All right? So this isn't normal, okay? But here's some basic things like I would look for. They're not in any hierarchy of importance. And again, you guys, what's important in certain stages for one person is going to be not that important for another person, or could be completely overlooked, et cetera, et cetera. So for most people, the first place to start is if you're struggling with a low body fat percent or a total testosterone, for example, let's say low. This is all relative, but I would say anything like 800 or below is considered low, especially if you're, 40 or below, for sure. Okay? So if you're within that range, especially if you're like at 200 or 300, that's like abysmally low. Then for sure, you need to use that as a sign, your body's way of telling you that something is definitely very wrong. And you need to put that under the microscope and see what kind of behaviors, how am I thinking, how am I living, what am I eating, et cetera, what's causing this number to be so low, because that's not natural at all, So the first place to start is always to look at your body fat range. So the average American is around 27% body fat, from my observation, and that's obese. So 20% for a male is overweight, 25% is obese. And then basically, according to government standards, like 35% and above is morbidly obese. But really, I think it should be 30%. And I think eventually these numbers will be adjusted to be considered morbidly obese for a male. So the issue with a lot of males in the US is they're way more overweight than they think they are. I actually spoke to a person a few days ago that was clearly obese. And he didn't believe me when I told him he was obese. By me just looking at him, I could tell he's obese. And the problem is people think when they hear the word obese, they think it's like some huge balloon of a person. And usually that's like morbidly obese. But most Americans are obese. And you can tell easily visually by like if you have, let's say 2 inches of protruding belly fat from your belly button. From below your belly button. Let's say it's good 2 inches. For sure, person is obese, okay? If it's above 2 inches, then probably closer to morbidly obese and stuff of that sort. And pretty much, it's Saturday, go outside, literally anywhere in America, anywhere. Like I have some people here, I can tell from Texas, and Alejandro, I don't know where you live, but let me know where you live. And whatever state Alejandro is in, okay, you guys, your homework, just step outside anywhere. Go anywhere. Movie theater, grocery store, And you'll see 9 out of 10 American males you run into have at least 2 inches of protruding belly fat below their belly button area. Okay, so they're obese. And it's important to realize this. And most Americans don't, and thus they don't perceive that there's a problem. They are problem unaware. So when a person is in a stage of being problem unaware and they don't see anything wrong, obviously they're not going to change anything. Okay, so it's important to be problem aware as your first stage of heading into a life of living like a human being, basically. Okay, and stuff of that sort. So again, presuming, and I'm probably right, you know, you're around 25% body fat, so you're obese. Okay, and that's fine. And even if you're older, let's say 50, 60 years old, do not even worry about it, because the good news is losing body fat is easy at any age. And I know I'm going to get the oldies coming out, oh, you know, with age it gets, no, it doesn't get tough with age. That's bullshit. Okay? Metabolism doesn't even, barely even change from your mid-20s to your mid-60s. And if you actually stayed compliant with a good weightlifting routine and added quite a bit of muscle over the decades, your metabolism would actually improve as you age. So don't buy this oldie, oh, it gets tough with gaining weight as you age, etc., etc. The real culprit is going back to this mind virus. That's why people gain weight with age. They have a mind virus. They have a belief system that doesn't facilitate health-conscious choices, and most likely a severe lack of education around various health principles. Like they have no idea of what healthy nutrition is, how to train properly, how to manage your central nervous system properly, how to keep healthy visceral tissue, how to replenish or keep strong your keystone species in your gut, how to improve your metabolic health markers, all of this stuff. They have zero understanding, zero. And you can tell, you guys, by just going like, oh, you know, like, what's your definition of eating healthy? If they start telling you like fasting or any trendy diet, blue zone diet, keto, whatever, or just eating less, or very vague things like this, that's an instant giveaway. They know nothing. And that's okay. But you need to go from the stage of being problem unaware to problem aware, and then have a good definition of what that problem is, and then create a solution for it. Because I know everyone's all about the sugar coating, reframing the negative into the positive so you can feel better, but trust me, you guys, that just provides you short-term relief and no long-term solution. But the long-term solution is what's really going to improve the quality of your life. And you'll never get there if you just keep staying in this problem unaware stage, especially with most American males not realizing they're pretty much obese. They're not overweight. They don't need to lose a few pounds. They're literally obese. And they need to lose probably like 30, 40, 50 pounds on average, okay? On top of fix a myriad of things that led to all that weight gain, including revamping their entire belief system around what even living like a human being looks like, because all of that stuff is broken. For a person to become, 40 or 50 pounds overweight, there has to be severe rupture in the foundation of all of their health principles. Not like little chips here and there, not like it needs a new paint job. I mean, talking about destroyed, okay? So it needs to be rebuilt from scratch. And of course, excess weight is a symptom. So don't get stuck in managing symptoms, because managing symptoms only yields more symptoms over time. And a terrible thing people do is they start using diet and exercise to manage the symptom of excess weight, and it never works. And then the more delusional crowd starts using Mounjaro or Ozempic. They're even completely gargantuously even more lost, okay? And they're not meeting the problem at the level of the problem, and thus the problem will always persist. Will always persist. You might have some short-term results and brag online like, hey, I did keto and I lost 20 or 30 pounds. Please, you guys, next time you see that, take a screenshot of that, and just for giggles, write in your Google Calendar, do a 1-year follow-up with this person from when you took that screenshot. And you'll see they're more obese than ever. Okay, this happens literally 95% of the time. 95% of the time. You can go to pubmed.gov and find a gargantuous amount of studies showing the model that where people believe all you have to do is just change your diet and exercise program and you'll be a success. It's a failure. Or take medical drugs, stuff of that sort. So you guys got to decrease your body fat. If you have low testosterone, the first place to look at is, am I overweight or am I obese? And if you are, that should be the first step to look into, okay? And the ideal body fat range for males, I would say, is between 10 and 12%. Some people would argue between 10 or 15%. Very few would argue above 15%. So it's definitely somewhere between 10 to 15%. I've seen from clients metabolic markers improve greatly, if not completely return back to normal, almost every time when their body fat went down to 10 or 12%. And their testosterone went up a lot as well. Of course, we did a few other things outside of just focusing on body fat during that time, but that's one of the big players. And remember, you guys, when you have excess body weight, you have chronic inflammation in your body all the time. And you can look up the inflammation theory of disease and you will see pretty much all disease, the foundation, all disease starts with chronic inflammation, okay? So that's something to look into. For body fat testing, do a mirror check. You don't need to spend a lot of money. If you want to be super scientific about it, get a DEXA scan. DEXA scan in a big metropolitan area, you can pretty much find that anywhere. It's like $100 or so. It takes a few minutes and they give you the results right away. And I challenge you guys, go ahead and do it. And I guarantee you 9 out of 10 of you will be 25% body fat or above, which is obese. Then you got to take corrective action. You can't stay in this stage of denial, okay? So that's the first biggest step that a lot of people will probably need to take, okay? The next step is take a look at your metabolic health markers. Metabolic health is defined as your body fat, I would say, blood pressure, resting blood glucose levels, triglycerides, and HDL. And at least make sure those markers are within healthy ranges. Okay, so that's a good start as well. And the good thing is once you get your metabolic health in order, those markers act as kind of like a foundation, the pillars to the house, okay? So now you have like at least a strong frame for the house and a strong foundation. And you can now build additions to the house, you know, like the wall, the insulation, the plumbing, etc., etc. But when you start trying to build all that other stuff first and you have poor metabolic health, you're building on top of a broken foundation. And no matter how good the materials are or how good the construction crew you hired is, etc., they're building a nice house on top of a broken foundation. And thus, the house will have all sorts of issues. It might cave in the foundation, create cracks, etc., or maybe crumble completely. So that's another thing to look at, your metabolic health markers. Are they within range? Am I metabolically healthy? And right now, 9 out of 10 Americans are metabolically unhealthy, okay? So I would challenge yourself, go get those tests done. See where you are. And hopefully, you know, it's up to you. But in my opinion, people that go get those tests done and see that the numbers are out of range and do absolutely no behavioral change of what led to those numbers being out of range and just go for the medical drug route are like the lowest IQ, most impulsive people ever. So I would definitely personally not do that. And that's from my observation, people that go that route. So, okay. Another thing to check out if you want to dive deeper is maybe get a full male hormone blood panel. And this will test like a bunch of different hormone markers on top of your total testosterone, free testosterone, sex hormone, binding globulin, etc., estradiol, all that stuff, okay? This is good. I would suggest actually getting your metabolic markers and a full male hormone panel done like once a year, all right? Just to keep track of it, in case something ever goes wrong, you have a list of markers that you could look back on and say, well, I felt great in 2015 and the numbers looked all like this. Now I feel very sick in 2030. You know, where have the numbers changed? And it could help add more analytics and data to your approach and thus take a bit of the guesswork out of it from certain vantage points, because you don't want to be guessing your way to success, because that never works long term. If you don't plan, you plan to fail, kind of the saying goes, all right? So with full male hormone panels, if you have like a knowledgeable family physician, they'll order it for you. But most will not. They'll be like, well, we need to wait until you're sick before we order these tests for you, which is completely moronic. Okay, so you might have to do this through an independent lab. Or like I work with a medical doctor, for example, that orders these tests in a hormone clinic as well if a person needs them. You can go to a medical doctor that specializes in hormone replacement therapy. You don't need to get the treatments from them if you don't want to, but at least they will for sure order a comprehensive male blood panel for you. You may need to pay out of pocket for it, so it could be a few $100, but that would be some great information to look into. So, okay, I'm gonna take a little break. Carlos, what is going on? Let me know if you have any questions at all. Okay, another thing to look into is being careful in decreasing your exposure to various synthetic pesticides or biocides that are used in the food production system. So like the average newborn born in a metropolitan area is born with trace amounts of around 120 to 150 different industrial and agricultural chemicals in their bloodstream already. And unfortunately, all these chemicals, they disrupt your hormones, but disrupt them in a negative way, I would say, comically here. They shoot your estrogen way up and decrease your testosterone, among, adding a lot of toxic load to your visceral tissue, et cetera, et cetera. So you guys have to remember, these pesticides in the US are not tested for safety as a complete formulation. What's required by the regulatory bodies is, and this is done in the European Union as well, it's pretty much a copy and paste model, is they have to just test the active ingredient in isolation on its own and never the complete formulation. So you as a consumer would think like they take the complete product, they spray it on some apple, and they see the detrimental health effects. It's not the case. That never happens. What ends up happening is just they test the active ingredient in isolation on its own with the exclusion of all the inactive, or sometimes what they're referred to as inert ingredients. And you guys can go to Home Depot. A very popular product is Roundup Ready. Look at the back of the label. You will see on the back of the label, they have two categories of different chemicals. So one is the active ingredient, and that could vary from being 1% or 0.5% of the complete formulation, maybe even 50% of the complete formulation. And you'll see below that they have a bunch of called inactive or inert ingredients, and that could be 99.5% of the formulation volume or 50% or something like that. It varies from product to product. It even varies from formulation to formulation. Like a lot of people don't know, but there are even hundreds of different Roundup Ready formulations with the same active ingredient, but a different combination of inactive ingredients. And you will see a lot of these, all of these inactive ingredients are under a proprietary blend, so it's company secret. And thus you can't even investigate which of those chemicals are there. And again, they're not testing the complete formulation. And when independent labs do test the complete formulation, it's most always more toxic than the active ingredient on its own. And that totally makes sense, because that's why the inactive ingredients have been created, to make the active ingredient more potent and more persistent in the environment. The inactive ingredients are basically ingredients specially formalized for that particular, the job of that particular, like herbicide, fungicide, pesticide, rodenticide, whatever, insecticide, etc., etc. Okay, so the inactive ingredients could vary quite a bit. Usually the active ingredient kind of stays fairly static from formulation to formulation. Okay, and none of these are tested for safety as complete formulations. When they are, they show that they're gargantuously more toxic. And on top of that, in a farming cycle, you never use one complete formulation ever. You usually use multiple during a single growing season. And a lot of times the farmers even mix these in a single container, and it has kind of like a synergistic effect oftentimes with these chemicals. So instead of like a magnifying effect, so instead of like 1 + 1 equaling 2, 1 + 1 could equal like 100 now, or 1,000, etc., etc. And you create completely new chemicals by combining these chemicals that for sure have never been tested for safety ever. And that's being sprayed directly on your food. And you notice a lot of these workers, they wear like hazmat suits. It looks like they're in Chernobyl when the atomic nuclear power plant exploded, you know? And they're spraying this stuff on your food, and then you are eating the food. And remember, like a biocide, it's created to kill living organisms. Last time I checked, humans are living organisms, so something to consider. You can find a gargantuous amount of studies on especially glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in Roundup Ready, on PubMed.gov, on how it disrupts the delicate balance in your gut microbiome and thus altering your digestion, okay? So this is a long conversation. I actually did a close to 2-hour solo cast on this, debunking various foolish medical doctors online that are saying these chemicals are completely safe. But again, go to any of these medical conventions and it's like an obesity convention. These people are like so sick, so completely lost and delusional about like what health and wellness is. This is why Americans, no one's getting better in America. Even our health professionals are sick to the nth degree. It's so comical. And you guys, please, I challenge you, go to these conventions just one time and try to prove me wrong. You will not prove me wrong, trust me. Okay, so we covered a few things. Guys, let's rehearse really quick. Body fat. Pretty much 9 out of 10 Americans are obese or overweight, okay? So you got to get your body fat down to about 10 or 12%-ish range. That's the first step if you are overweight, because unfortunately too, when you're overweight, it creates this aromatization process where your body starts converting your testosterone into more estrogen and thus making you more overweight, etc., etc. So metabolic health, make sure your metabolic health markers are on point. Full male hormone panel, pesticides. And remember, you guys, a lot of males, they come in and they're like in 30s, you know, whatever, 40s, and their testosterone is so low. And they're like, well, it's my age. Trust me, it's not your age. You're overweight, you're metabolically sick, you're living life unsustainably, you're buying factory farm junk, your toxic load is through the roof, you're basically like a walking Chernobyl, and a myriad of other things. Not sleeping well, shitty personal relationships, unsustainable work deadlines, etc., etc. This is why your testosterone is so low. All of those things, okay? And how will taking testosterone replacement therapy fix all of those things, which are lowering the quality of your life so much? It won't, okay? So let's, again, at least have an IQ of 2 or above, please. All right, so next, plastics. Try to be aware of plastics. It's hard to eliminate your exposure to microplastics these days, because even if you buy high quality meat products, they're typically wrapped in plastic, okay? You could get meat products that are kind of wrapped in a, I forgot the material's name, but basically kind of like paper. Those are like smaller, more very kind of like higher end meat producing companies, etc. I know with my hunting mentor, Greg Pleasant, he used a lot of those and he didn't use plastic at all. But plastics are everywhere. Easy things to do though is just try initially not drinking out of plastic, okay? Or not heating up your food in small plastic containers, especially putting any hot food or hot liquids in a plastic container and then drinking those liquids after, or eating that food after, etc., etc. Stuff of that sort. Okay, so those are easy things to do. I'm trying to think. I knew a bunch of other tips. I think those are the biggest ones. I'm trying to think. Probably remember this after the podcast is done. But I'll think of it maybe even towards the end. But basically, you try to be consciously aware of your exposure to various microplastics. You can see, boom, we're drinking out of glass here, okay? I never have any plastic Tupperware containers, all that stuff, right? So, all right. From a training perspective, one great thing a lot of people can do is train for hypertrophy. Definitely avoid high intensity training like CrossFit classes, which beat up your adrenal glands, throw off your HPA axis regulation, thus decreasing your testosterone. Avoid long distance or high intensity cardio. I would personally just stick to walking or some light work on the elliptical or maybe some light jump roping here and there. Avoid any kind of like high intensity stuff that is too exhausting in the adrenals, especially given the average person, their adrenals are basically already completely shot. The adrenal glands are kind of little cap looking glands that sit on top of the kidneys, and they release various hormones, one of them being cortisol. And you guys have to remember, when cortisol is being released chronically, a few things happen. So first of all, when you're releasing a lot of cortisol, your body isn't releasing a lot of testosterone. It's either like one or the other. Second, your body has a limited supply of all of these things. And cortisol is kind of like an alertness hormone. Without it, you're basically being like a zombie-like state, okay? So your body needs it. And you remember, your central nervous system, it still thinks you're like some caveman that is in a dark cave living 50,000 years ago, eats berries occasionally, okay? So it hasn't even changed in like 200,000 years. So it's always kind of thinking like, how can I get this person to survive in this external world? And one of the ways is like, okay, so I got this cortisol, for some reason it's producing so much. But remember, your mind is encased in a skull and it doesn't see the outside world. And it still thinks you're this kind of caveman. And it's like, what is going on? This person is chronically stressed all the time. They're very anxious, etc., etc. This cortisol is being produced, but it's in limited supply. So let's kind of back it down a little bit. Let's shut it down. And then the symptoms that usually arise are like chronic fatigue, or adrenal fatigue is a very general term. But basically, you run into stages of just always being tired, basically depressed. You even start, you're in late stages of adrenal fatigue when you start strategizing how much effort it's going to take for you to get up out of your bed, go walk outside, open your car door, sit in your car, go drive to the grocery store, walk through the parking lot. Once you start kind of evaluating and economizing energy to that extent, there's a good chance that you are in late stages of adrenal fatigue. Sexual dysfunction, such as erectile sexual dysfunction, is also very, very common. So back to my point, I would personally just avoid high intensity training. There's no need to do that even when you're trying to build like a beautiful and healthy body. So I would personally stick to kind of hypertrophy training and spending a lot of time really trying to optimize your muscle to fat ratio. So ideally having as much muscle as possible with as little fat as possible. And with as little fat as possible, I mean 10 to 12%, okay? And by altering your body composition like that, you will help promote more testosterone naturally in your body and look much better and be much more durable, etc., etc. For those people that are more aesthetically inclined, putting on muscle in your body is basically one of the greatest things you can do to look young into older age. Like, the reason a lot of people start looking very old very quickly is they start losing muscle mass at an accelerated rate in their 40s and 50s if they're already very inactive to begin with. And a lot of those poor lifestyle sedentary practices really catch up to them with a tremendous amount of interest, and they start looking like a shriveled prune, basically, okay? But if you look, even females or males, 50s, 60s, but they're still like very buff, they still look very vital, youthful, their skin has good elasticity, etc., etc., okay? But you need to start early because fat loss is quick at any age, but muscle gain, it's outside of maybe the first 2 years where you have like good newbie gains, it's a very slow process. You got to be very consistent with it and start fairly early in life to be able to accumulate enough muscle tissue by the time you hit your 50s or 60s, etc., etc. So I would personally also, I don't see any benefit with doing like barbell deadlifts or squats. It's very exhausting on the central nervous system. It understimulates each individual muscle group. And there's also a huge risk factor to it as well. People grossly underestimate the technical competency you need to be able to do a deadlift and barbell back squat correctly. There is a tremendous amount of knowledge that has to be attained, how to properly core brace, how to properly engage all of the muscles of your body into one synchronized unit, with an emphasis at keeping your core and hips very engaged and solid the entire time. And there's also the mechanics of the movement in and of itself. Then there's also the knowledge required to be able to program appropriately so that you have enough biological adaptation from phase to phase to not wear down, in particular, your passive tissue. So like your tendons, ligaments, intervertebral discs, cartilage, etc., etc. All of these things adapt at a much slower pace than your active tissue, which is the muscle tissue. So a lot of times people get really strong and they think they have that biological adaptation they may in their muscle, but remember, the passive tissue adapts much, much slower, and then they get an injury, etc., etc., okay? So, okay. And then a big one for a lot of people is at the end of the day, and if they don't change this one, they're kind of screwed altogether, because your central nervous system, you know, it's your brain, your spinal cord, and it has a bunch of nerve roots going into all of your visceral tissue and all of your muscle tissue, etc., etc. And if you're living life unsustainably and have a gargantuous amount of like micro stressors, macro stressors in combination, crazy deadlines at work, unfulfilling home relationship that's also very stressful, whatever, chronic financial stress, all that stuff, it's going to keep your central nervous system revved up, right? Because it's trying to get you to survive better in the external world. And if it senses that you have constant threats in the external world, it gets overworked and exhausted like anyone else, okay? So if you're in that fight or flight state constantly, then of course your testosterone is going to be suppressed, and also just your quality of life is going to be very low. And most likely your blood pressure would creep up, your various maladaptive behaviors would form as well, which would lead to poor lifestyle and nutritional choices. Because remember, when a person is exhausted, burned out, unhappy, they have to form maladaptive behavior to deal with that, because if they don't, the other option is just committing suicide, okay? And maladaptive behavior is just basically a counter created by the central nervous system to buy more time and continue to live in an unsustainable environment. But you guys, I know it's been normalized, but it's not normal to sit at a computer for 10 hours a day. You know, it's not normal to have crazy deadlines, be exposed to them week after week after week, etc., etc., have like gargantuan stimulation. So like the amount of information a person is exposed to in a single day today, I heard this from Paul Chek, maybe like 200 or 300 years ago, that person was exposed to in their entire lifetime. So this is a gargantuous amount of influx of mostly, I would say, a lot of negative information that is also burdening the central nervous system and keeping it in this fight or flight state, this agitated state. And when the person stays in that state, remember, all of the systems are interconnected. Especially with this one, it's most obvious because all of the nerve roots from the central nervous system are going to all of your visceral tissue and muscle tissue. So you notice when you're kind of tense, you know, your muscles tense, you know, your traps can get really tight, etc., or your digestion changes, all of that stuff, or you don't sleep well. This is a good indication of how interconnected all of these systems are. And that needs to be changed. And it's tough, I know, but that's just what needs to happen. And I don't know. This is only for people that are ready for real and honest change. This is the stuff you need to look at, and you need to actually change, not understand intellectually. Because I talk to people sometimes, they're like, oh, I get it. I'm like, I know you get it. A 2-year-old child that maybe even brain dead can understand this. But are you actually doing this? That's the real question. And my response is no. And just looking at the answer, looking at the statistics nationally, 9 out of 10 Americans are metabolically sick. 8.5 out of 10 are overweight or obese. 900,000 are dying from heart disease every year. Half develop cancer within their lifetime. I think out of the million or so COVID deaths, 850,000 of those deaths could have easily been prevented if the person didn't have comorbidities. Tongue twister there. And wasn't already extremely obese. Okay? This is an indication of a sick society, guys. And someone's got to talk about it. It's not the lightest or most Disney topic to talk about, but it needs to be brought up because most people are still living in this problem unaware stage. And they're mentally and physically unwell, and they're totally normalized it. They're like, well, this is how life is. And it may have been like that all of their life, but I guarantee you, that is what normalized pathology 101 looks like. So I hope this helps, guys. Thanks for jumping in, and have a good weekend. Yeah, it's the weekend. All right, guys, have a good one. Bye.